Have you ever sat alone in a room, surrounded by nothing but the sound of your own breathing, and felt that deep ache in your chest? That feeling that seems to whisper everyone else is out there living their lives, connected, while I'm in here, alone. I see you. I see that pain, that longing for connection. And today, I want to share something with you that might sound strange at first, but I promise will change how you view every solitary moment of your life from this day forward. You see, that loneliness you're feeling, it's not your enemy. It's actually one of the greatest gifts you've ever received. And I know right now that might sound about as comforting as being told a root canal is good for you. But stay with me, because what I'm about to share will transform how you experience every lonely moment for the rest of your life. Think about this. When was the last time you actually sat with your loneliness instead of running from it? When did you last turn off your phone, step away from the noise, and really listen to what that feeling was trying to tell you? Most of us spend our entire lives doing everything possible to avoid being alone. We fill every moment with noise, with distractions, with anything to keep us from facing that quiet space within ourselves. But here's the profound truth that changed my life, and I believe will change yours. Loneliness is not a sign that something's wrong with you. It's a sign that you're finally ready to discover who you truly are. Let me share something deeply personal with you. There was a time in my life when I couldn't stand being alone. The silence felt like it would swallow me whole. I would keep the TV on just to have background noise. I'd call anyone, scroll through social media endlessly, anything to avoid that feeling of being completely alone with myself. And you know what I discovered? The more I ran from loneliness, the stronger it became. Then one day something shifted. I realized that all this running, all this avoiding was actually running from myself. And that's when I asked myself a question that changed everyone. What if loneliness isn't a punishment? Think about nature for a moment. Every great transformation in nature happens in solitude. A caterpillar doesn't become a butterfly in the middle of a party. A seed doesn't sprout into our hyper-connected world has forgotten. True strength, true wisdom, true self-discovery comes not from constant connection with others, but from learning to be at peace with ourselves. But I hear you asking, how do I transform this painful loneliness into something meaningful? That's exactly what we're going to explore together, because once you understand the hidden advantages of loneliness, you'll never see those solitary moments the same way again. Think of loneliness like a gym for your soul. Just as physical exercise might be uncomfortable in the moment but makes you stronger, loneliness is emotional exercise that builds your spiritual and emotional muscles. Every moment you spend alone is an opportunity to build resilience, self-understanding, and inner peace. When you're lonely, you're forced to confront parts of yourself you might have been avoiding. You can't distract yourself from your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own truth. And while that might feel uncomfortable at first, it's in this discomfort that real growth begins. Consider this. How many times have you made decisions based on what others think, rather than what you truly want? How often have you ignored your inner wisdom because it was drowned out by the noise of others' opinions? Loneliness strips away all those external influences and leaves you face to face with your authentic self. You see, loneliness is not the absence of connection. It's an invitation to the most important connection of all. The connection with yourself. When you begin to view it this way, everything changes. Those quiet moments become sacred instead of scary. The silence becomes soothing instead of... And here's something even more powerful. When you learn to embrace loneliness, you develop a kind of superpower. You no longer make choices from a place of fear or need. You no longer settle for relationships that don't serve your highest good. You no longer compromise your values just to avoid being alone. Think about the most balanced, peaceful people you know. I bet they're comfortable being alone. They don't need constant validation or company. They've learned what we're discussing right now, that loneliness, when embraced, transforms into solitude, and solitude is where we find our true power. But let's be really honest here. This isn't easy. Our entire society is built around the idea that being alone is somehow wrong, that it's something to be fixed. We're bombarded with messages that tell us we should always be connected, always be social, always be surrounded by others. How many times have you felt embarrassed about being alone? How many times have you made plans you didn't want to make just to avoid being by yourself? How many times have you stayed in situations, relationships, jobs, friendships that weren't right for you simply because you feared being alone? This is where the real transformation begins. Because once you start seeing loneliness as an advantage rather than an affliction, everything shifts. You start to recognize that those moments of solitude are actually moments of incredible opportunity. In the silence of loneliness, you can finally hear your dreams clearly. The truth is, we run from loneliness because we're afraid of what we might find when we finally stop running. We're afraid of our own thoughts, our own feelings, our own truth. But here's the magnificent irony. Everything you're seeking out there in the world, every answer you're desperately searching for, every connection you're longing to make, it all begins with being alone. Think about water for a moment. When water is still, it becomes clear. You can see straight to the bottom. But when it's constantly disturbed, constantly in motion, it becomes murky. Your mind works the same way. In loneliness, in stillness, clarity emerges. The answers you've been seeking suddenly become visible. You might be thinking, but what about all the pain that comes with being lonely? And you're right. Loneliness can hurt. It can feel like a weight on your chest, like walls closing in. But have you noticed how the things that transform us the most often begin with discomfort? Consider this. Every time you feel that ache of loneliness, it's actually pointing you towards something important. It's like a compass, showing you where you need to grow. When you feel lonely because you miss someone, it's teaching you about. When you feel lonely in a crowd, it's teaching you about authentic connection. When you feel lonely with your thoughts, it's teaching you about self-acceptance. The problem isn't the loneliness. It's our resistance to it. We've been conditioned to believe that if we're not constantly connected, constantly busy, constantly surrounded by others, we're somehow failing at life. But let me ask you something. How many of your most important realizations came when you were alone? How many of your biggest breakthroughs happen in solitude? You see, loneliness has a wisdom all its own. It's like a strict but loving teacher, showing us exactly what we need to learn about ourselves. When you're lonely, you can't hide from your own truth anymore. You can't distract yourself from your own growth. You're finally forced to face the one person you've been avoiding, yourself. And here's where it gets really interesting. Have you ever noticed how some people seem completely at peace with themselves? How they can walk into a room full of strangers and remain completely centered? How they make decisions with such clarity and confidence? I'll tell you their secret. They've learned to be friends with loneliness. These people understand something profound, but that true strength doesn't come from never being alone, but from being completely okay with it. They've discovered that loneliness isn't a weakness to be overcome, but a power to be harnessed. Think about this. Every time you feel lonely, you're actually being given a gift. It's an opportunity to develop a relationship with yourself that's so strong, so secure, that no external circumstance can shake it. It's a chance to build a foundation of self-trust that will serve you for the rest of your life. But here's the part that might surprise you. The more comfortable you become with being alone, the more authentic your connections with others become. Why? Because you're no longer coming from a place of need. You're no longer trying to fill a void. You're connecting from a place of wholeness, of completeness. Ask yourself, how many times have you stayed in situations that weren't right for you because you were afraid of being alone? How many times have you compromised your values, your dreams, your truth, just to avoid feeling lonely? What if all those moments of loneliness were actually trying to guide you toward your authentic path? You see, loneliness isn't just an emotion. It's a doorway to self-discovery, to inner strength, to authentic power. But like any doorway, you have to be willing to walk through it. You have to be willing to stay with the discomfort long enough for it to transform into something beautiful. Remember this? Every great journey of self-discovery begins with a moment of feeling alone. Think about the most important relationship you'll ever have, the one with yourself. Every moment of loneliness is an opportunity to deepen that relationship, to understand yourself better, to love yourself more fully. It's like having a private conversation with your own soul, uninterrupted by the noise of the world. But here's what most people never realize. Loneliness is actually a sign of emotional intelligence. It means you're aware enough to recognize when connections aren't authentic. It means you're conscious enough to know when something's missing. It means you're evolved enough to sense when you're not living in alignment with your truth. Let me share something with you that might change how you see loneliness forever. Have you ever watched a master artist at work? They need space. They need quiet. They need solitude, because true creativity, true inspiration, true genius, it doesn't emerge from constant connection. It emerges from the depths of being alone with your thoughts. You are the artist of your life. And just like any artist, you need that sacred space of solitude to create your masterpiece. But we've forgotten this simple truth. We become so afraid of being alone that we filled every moment with noise, every second with distraction, every space with somebody else's presence. Think about the last time you had a brilliant idea. Where were you? I bet you weren't in the middle of a crowded party. I bet you weren't scrolling through social media. You were probably alone, maybe in the shower, maybe on a quiet walk, maybe lying in bed at night. That's not coincidence. That's the power of solitude at work. You see, loneliness has gotten a bad reputation. We've been taught to see it as something negative, something to fix, something to avoid at all costs. But what if loneliness is actually your inner wisdom trying to create space for something magnificent to emerge? Consider this. In nature, nothing grows constantly surrounded by others. Seeds need their own space to sprout. Trees need their own soil to grow deep roots. Flowers need their own patch of earth to bloom. Why do we think humans are any different? When you feel lonely, it's like your soul is creating a clearing in the forest of your life. It's making space for new growth, new insights, new possibilities. But most of us never allow that growth to happen because we're too busy trying to fill the clearing with noise and people and distractions. Ask yourself this: what are you really afraid of finding in those quiet moments alone? What truth are you trying to avoid by keeping yourself constantly connected? What part of yourself are you afraid to face? Because here's what I've discovered. The things we're most afraid to face alone are usually the things that hold the key to our greatest growth. The silence we're most afraid to sit with usually contains the wisdom we most need to hear. You know what's fascinating? The more comfortable you become with being alone, the more you realize that loneliness isn't about the absence of others, it's about the presence of yourself. And that presence is the most powerful force for transformation in your life. Think about this. How many times have you made a decision you later regretted because you were afraid of being alone? How many times have you said yes when your heart was screaming no, just to avoid feeling lonely? How many times have you settled for less than you deserve because you thought having somebody, anybody, was better than having nobody? Now imagine living from a different place. Imagine making choices not from fear of being alone, but from the wisdom of knowing you're complete just as you are. Imagine building relationships not from neediness, but from awe. Imagine living your life not as a desperate attempt to avoid loneliness, but as a conscious choice to honor your truth. That's the gift that loneliness offers us. The opportunity to become so comfortable with ourselves that we never again make choices from fear. The chance to develop such a strong relationship with our own inner wisdom that we never again compromise our truth for the sake of company. Let me share something profound with you. The quality of your life is directly proportional to your ability to be alone. Not just physically alone, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually alone. Because it's in that aloneness that you discover who you really are beneath all the roles you play, beneath all the masks you wear, beneath all the personas you've created to please others. And here's the beautiful paradox. The more comfortable you become with being alone, the more authentic your connections with others become. Because you're no longer connecting from emptiness seeking to be filled. You're connecting from fullness seeking to share. Think about the ocean for a moment. The surface can be choppy, turbulent, full of waves and noise. But the deeper you go, the quieter it becomes. Your inner world works the same way. The surface might feel lonely, turbulent, uncomfortable. But if you're willing to go deeper, to stay with a profound philosopher, every transformative leader understood the power of solitude. They knew that true strength, true wisdom, true peace comes not from constant connection with others, but from deep connection with oneself. You might be thinking, but what about the pain? What about the discomfort? What about the ache of being alone? And you're right, loneliness can hurt. But have you noticed how the things that transform us the most often begin with discomfort? Just like physical exercise might be uncomfortable in the moment, but makes you stronger. Emotional solitude might be uncomfortable, but makes you wiser, more resilient, more authentically you. Each moment of loneliness is like a rep in the gym of your soul, building spiritual and emotional muscles you didn't even know you had. And here's something even more powerful. When you learn to embrace loneliness, you develop a kind of immunity to manipulation and peer pressure. You no longer make choices based on what others think, because you've developed such a strong connection with your own inner wisdom. You no longer compromise your values just to fit in, because you've discovered the joy of being authentically yourself. Let me tell you something that might sound strange at first. Your loneliness is actually a sign of your readiness it's like a cosmic tap on the shoulder, a divine invitation to go deeper into yourself, to discover treasures that can only be found in solitude. You see, we live in a world that's terrified of being alone. We've created endless ways to stay connected, to stay distracted, to stay away from that quiet space within ourselves. But what if all this running, all this avoiding, all this fear of being alone is actually keeping us from our greatest power? Think about this. When was the last time you actually welcomed loneliness instead of fighting it? When was the last time you said, "Come in, old friend, what do you have to teach me today?" Because that's what loneliness really is, a teacher, a guide, a wise old friend trying to show us something important about ourselves. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to have an unshakable sense of peace about them? How they can walk through life's storms without losing their center? I'll tell you their secret. They've learned to find home within themselves. They've discovered that the antidote to loneliness isn't more connection with others. It's deeper connection with themselves. But here's what nobody tells you about loneliness. It's actually a sign of emotional sophistication. Think about it. Who feels lonely? People who understand the value of genuine connection. People who can tell the difference between superficial interaction and real intimacy. People who aren't willing to settle for less than authentic relationships. Your loneliness isn't a flaw. It's a feature. It's your inner wisdom saying you deserve more than shallow connections. You deserve more than surface-level relationships. You deserve more than just filling space with noise and activity. Consider the greatest inventions, the most beautiful works of art, the most profound philosophical insights. Where did they come from? Not from people who were constantly surrounded by others, constantly connected, constantly distracted. They came from people who were willing to spend time alone with their thoughts, their ideas, their creativity. What if your loneliness is actually trying to create space for your own masterpiece to emerge? What if those quiet moments you've been running from are actually pregnant with possibility, full of potential, waiting for you to finally pay attention? You know, it's fascinating. The more comfortable you become with being alone, the more you realize that loneliness was never about the absence of others. Wisdom appeared. And here's something even more powerful. When you learn to embrace loneliness, you develop a kind of superpower. You become immune to emotional manipulation. You become resistant to peer pressure. You become free from the need for constant validation because you found something more valuable than approval. You found yourself. Ask yourself this: how many of your current habits, beliefs, and choices are actually yours? How many are just things you've adopted to avoid being alone? How many parts of your life are authentic expressions of who you are, and how many are just strategies to keep loneliness at bay? Because here's the truth. Until you can be alone with yourself, you can't truly be yourself with others. Until you can find peace in solitude, you'll always be seeking peace in all the wrong places. Until you can embrace loneliness, you'll always be running from the very thing that's trying to set you free. Think about the most important conversations in your life, the ones that changed everything. The ones that opened your eyes to new possibilities, the ones that helped you grow. Weren't many of those conversations actually silent ones? Weren't they moments when you finally got quiet enough to hear your own inner wisdom speaking? That's what loneliness is offering you. The chance to have the most important conversation of your life, the conversation with yourself, The conversation with your dreams, your fears, your hopes, your truth. The conversation that everyone else's voices have been drowning out. And here's the beautiful irony. When you finally stop running from loneliness, when you finally turn and face it, when you finally say, "What are you here to teach me?" That's when loneliness transforms into solitude. That's when the pain transforms into peace. That's when the emptiness transforms into fullness. Remember this? Every great journey of self-discovery begins with a moment of feeling alone. Every profound transformation starts with a period of isolation. Every butterfly must first endure the solitude of its cocoon. Your loneliness isn't a punishment. It's an invitation to become who you truly are. You might be thinking, but what about the need for human connection? What about relationships? What about love? And you're absolutely right that we are social beings. We need connection. We need relationships. We need love. But here's the key. All of those things become more genuine, more authentic, more meaningful when they come from a place of self-wholeness rather than self-escape. When you learn to be alone, you stop using relationships as bandages for your wounds. You stop using other people as distractions from your pain. You stop trying to fill your inner emptiness with outer connections. Instead, you begin to relate to others from a place of fullness, of wholeness, of completeness. Let me share something powerful with you, something that will forever change how you experience those moments when you feel most alone. Your loneliness isn't a wall. It's a bridge to the most important destination you'll ever reach, your authentic self. You know what's remarkable about bridges? They can feel scary while you're crossing them. They can make you feel vulnerable, exposed, uncertain, but they're also the only way to get from where you are to where you need to be. Your loneliness is exactly like that. It might feel uncomfortable, but it's leading you somewhere extraordinary. Think about the times in your life when you've grown the most. Weren't they often the times when you felt most alone? That's not a coincidence. Just like a seed needs darkness before it can break through to the light, we often need periods of solitude before we can break through to new levels of understanding. But here's what changes everything. The moment you stop seeing loneliness as something happening to you and start seeing it as something happening for you. Because loneliness isn't trying to break you, it's trying to make you. It's not trying to isolate you. It's trying to illuminate you. Ask yourself this. What if every moment of loneliness is actually a moment of preparation? What if the universe isn't punishing you with solitude, but preparing you for something magnificent? What if your loneliness is actually the cocoon where your future self is being formed? You see, we've been looking at loneliness all wrong. We've been seeing it as a sign of failure when it's actually a sign of readiness. Readiness for deeper understanding, readiness for authentic connection, readiness for true self-discovery. Think about this. How can you ever hear your own inner voice if you're never alone? How can you ever know what you truly want if you're always surrounded by other people's desires? How can you ever find your own path if you're always following someone else's footsteps? This is the magnificent paradox of loneliness. It's in our most solitary moments that we're actually least alone. Because in those quiet spaces, we finally get to meet ourselves. Not the self we pretend to be for others. Not the self we think we should be. But our real, authentic, magnificent self. And here's something even more powerful. When you learn to embrace your loneliness, you develop a kind of inner strength that nothing external can shake. You no longer need constant validation because you found something more valuable, your own truth. You no longer fear being alone because you've discovered that solitude is where your power lives. Remember this? The sign that you're strong enough to stand in your own truth, to hear your own wisdom, to follow your own path. So the next time loneliness visits you, welcome it. Say, thank you for creating this space where I can discover more of who I truly am. Thank you for this opportunity to grow stronger, to dig deeper, to fly higher. Because that's what loneliness really is. It's your spirit creating space for something magnificent to emerge. It's your soul making room for your authentic self to bloom. It's your inner wisdom giving you the greatest gift of all, the chance to finally become who you were always meant to be. And when you embrace this truth, when you really understand that your loneliness is actually your launch pad to transformation, everything changes. You no longer need to run from those quiet moments. You no longer need to fear those solitary spaces. You no longer need to resist those times of being alone. Instead, you can finally see them for what they truly are: sacred opportunities for self-discovery, powerful moments of personal growth, divine invitations to become more fully yourself. Because in the end, loneliness isn't your enemy. It's your ally in the most important journey you'll ever take. The journey to becoming authentically, magnificently, unshakably you. Remember, every great story of transformation begins with someone having the courage to stand alone. Every powerful journey of self-discovery starts with someone being brave enough to face their loneliness. Every magnificent butterfly first had to embrace the solitude of its cocoon. Your loneliness isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning. It's not your weakness. It's your way forward. It's not your curse. It's your catalyst for becoming everything you were always meant to be. So embrace it. Welcome it. Thank it. Because your loneliness isn't trying to break you, it's trying to make you. And what it's trying to make you into is something more magnificent than you ever imagined possible. This is your time. This is your moment. This is your invitation to transform your loneliness into your greatest advantage. Will you accept it? Will you embrace it? Will you allow it to show you who you truly are? Because when you do, when you finally understand that your loneliness is actually your doorway to wholeness, your pathway to power, your bridge to becoming, that's when everything changes. That's when you discover that you were never really alone at all. You were just becoming more fully, magnificently, authentically yourself. And in the end, isn't that the greatest advantage of all?